Hi guys, it's Dom here from Waddling About Rocking Out. Just had a wonderful chat with Brooke Millhouse, an adaptive athlete who started the Disabled and Proud podcast. We talked about our inspirations, a little bit about background, and loads more. What being an adaptive athlete means, and also goals for the future of the podcast. So much good stuff here. Brooke's a friend of mine, and I'm so proud to have this on our platform. Thank you so much for listening. Do check out the Disabled and Proud podcast. Search for it on Spotify and everywhere you get your podcasts, because obviously it's spreading a very important message around accessibility and diversity in the fitness world and beyond. So yeah, check it out, and thanks so much for watching this, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers. All right, so I'm sat here with Brooke. I had the great pleasure of being on Disabled and Proud, your brand new podcast, again, spotlighting some of the most wonderful talents and people in the disabled community on a national level. Obviously, you yourself are an adaptive athlete. That's a really cool, I think that's a cool term, because I'm not an adaptive athlete. What does being an adaptive athlete mean to you? And we'll talk about the podcast in a minute.
Ooh. So for me, an adaptive athlete is anybody who has to adapt what kind of mode of exercise that they're doing.
Yeah.
So whether that be because you're injured or because you're disabled, you have to change like an able-bodied workout or like mode of exercise to suit you and your needs.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of where that comes from. And it's kind of really been honed by CrossFit. They've really, they've really taken on board this whole like idea of an adaptive athlete and the adaptive athlete divisions. And I guess that's kind of where it comes from. Obviously not, stemming from CrossFit, but like they've really taken on that adaptive athlete and it's becoming a bit more widespread, which is lovely. And it's nice because there's so many different categories for people to be involved in, which, there wasn't before. Adaptive athletes, 5 years ago didn't exist. So it's nice to have that space, I guess, space and recognition to be able to do, the workouts and the exercise that you want to do that works for you.
And is that down to CrossFit then? Because again, a lot of brands and companies, it's not that it's not something they want to do or don't want to do, rather, but they don't always have the awareness to make these things happen. But like, what was the kind of process of you getting involved? Because you're a brand ambassador for a lot of these things, and you've kind of been a figurehead for adaptive athletes. And tell me about kind of that and how that worked.
So I've always really been interested in sports. Like I've always played sports, played team sports at uni, played team sports at school. And I guess when you get out of like institution in like, out of school, out of university, you become a bit like, obviously you kind of left to your own devices to be an adult, and now you've got to try and find out what modes of exercise work for you. And I've always been like a big fan of like a team sport, but because of where I was living, I didn't necessarily want to get involved in team sport because I couldn't give my time to the team sport. I couldn't give every weekend, and I couldn't always give the evenings. And that's quite imperative when you're working in a team sport, because obviously the whole idea is that you work as a team and you get better as a team. So I was trying to find something that gave me that camaraderie, but I was able to do individually. And I kind of stumbled upon CrossFit. Like I literally stumbled into it. And I knew that it was about pushing yourself. And I knew that it was like, really varied. And I really liked that. And I'd followed one of my guests, actually, who's the first guest on my podcast, Lou. I'd followed her for a little bit, and that's the type of workouts that she was doing. That's the kind of exercise she was doing. And she has like a very similar disability to me, except it's her left arm, not her right.
Okay.
And I was just watching, and I was like, do you know what? I might as well just give this a go and see where it takes me. So 2020, I decided to join a CrossFit box, and it was amazing because I really needed that sense of community at that point in time. Like 2020 was a rubbish year for everyone. We were all like locked in our own homes and stuff. And I didn't really know anybody where I lived. I'd kind of like ended up living where I was living, not necessarily by choice.
Right.
And kind of ended up here because my parents are close by, and my job before involved a lot of traveling, and then obviously travel stopped. So I ended up staying around this area. So I didn't really know anybody. And then I was like, okay, well, CrossFit seems to be like a really good way to like meet friends. Seems like a really good workout, both things I really enjoy. And ended up just going to a couple of classes and really enjoying them. And I'd been to the gym before, like I knew what I was doing. I wasn't completely oblivious to it. And then I kind of just got sucked in, and just ended up really, really loving it. And I'd say probably about this time last year. So obviously we went into the third lockdown in 2020. So that meant that I wasn't actually training in a CrossFit gym for like, 4 or 5 months. Cause obviously we went down, what was like beginning of November, and we didn't come out of it until April. So realistically, I've only really been training like solidly for a year since like this time last year. And I knew that CrossFit were opening the adaptive division. They opened it in 2021, but I never took part in it because I didn't really know anything about it. Wasn't really that indoctrinated into the lifestyle.
Okay.
And so I did it this year, and it was the second, I think it was the second year they've done the adaptive division, and ended up coming 20th worldwide, which
that's incredible.
It's a massive feat, and like I'm so proud of it.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so then I was like, oh God, this is a bit serious now, because I'm actually quite good. And I always knew that I was, pretty good, but I didn't realize I'd be as good as I was. And so from then it's kind of just spiraled a little bit, actually, because I've been to NFG, which is the National Fitness Games, had their first adaptive competition in April, and I competed at that, and that was incredible. There was loads of adaptive athletes there, and it was really, really good to see. I think it was their first ever adaptive event. And then I've got another event the end of this month, actually, part of an adaptive team, which will be amazing. We're the only adaptive team that we know of going, and we're competing against able-bodied just because we want to see what we can do, and we can show what we can do.
Yeah.
And and then there's like a lot of just really exciting stuff with fitness. I think it's a really great time to be involved in fitness if that's what you want to be involved in for adaptive athletes. Getting a lot more airtime, getting a lot more we've been giving a lot more opportunities than what we have been previously. And I think people are realizing that inclusion includes disabled bodies. It's not necessarily just like LGBTQ plus IA, all of that. It's not necessarily just black and white. It's everybody as a whole. And rarely now are we seeing sports campaigns without some form of disabled body in it, and I love that, because I didn't have that when I was younger. So it's
absolutely great. Yeah, it sounds like an incredible time. And going, you mentioned obviously you're kind of, you've always been into sports, in school and stuff. Where did that passion come from? Because again, it's not for everybody. You mentioned, like I say, it's a great time to become, to be in like to sort of be in fitness, but it's not for everyone. So tell me about your journey into fitness. When did it start? Where were you? What were you doing when you suddenly were like, you know what, I'm gonna do this? You know what I mean?
I honestly don't really have like a time, date, or place where I can tell you that I was like, I loved fitness, but I was a swimmer from a really, really, really young age. I swam for county. I did all of that. At one point I was like, chasing to be in the Paralympics, but I realized for me, swimming is very much an individual sport, which is amazing, but there's no real teamwork or camaraderie in it. And you don't really get the benefits of like team sports that you get from swimming. And then I moved schools and ended up getting really into hockey and netball, just because that was the team sports that you had to play. So like every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you had to play as part of games, and then you'd have like team matches on like a Wednesday and a Saturday, and that really worked for me. It gave me a bit of an outlet. Like I'm someone who's always had a lot of energy and a lot of I need to direct my energy. If I sit and fester, it's not necessarily good for me. It's not necessarily good for my mental health. So I've always been someone who needs like a physical outlet, whether that be playing a team sport, going for a run, going for a long walk. I need to be active, and I'm much more in control of everything when I'm active as well, which is good for me.
Yeah.
So it's always been like for my life. I don't remember not being involved in like a team sport or like gymnastics, or like I was doing taekwondo as well when I was really, really little, and like gymnastics. I remember going to like gymnastics hall when I was like 3, 4, 5. So I've always done it. And so for me not to do it would be abnormal. And I think I had one year I think 2019 was the one year that I didn't really do much in terms of like fitness. And I was like, I just don't know how people, how I need to find my thing, because I've lost that like uni security of like uni hockey. I was like coming, out of uni into the real world a bit. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I need to find my thing. So that's when I was like, hey, I need to start going to the gym properly and like learning how to go to the gym. And so yeah, so that was a wild year. It was a wild year.
It's incredible to hear about your journey as well, and I think again, some questions are sort of popping up into my head for anybody that sort of is inspired by what you're doing. And maybe they want to themselves look at becoming an adaptive athlete. What are the it's a similar line to what I'm going to ask you about the podcast and challenges of pulling it together. But what are the challenges of I guess kind of building the confidence to go and do that? And of course, because again, you've gone from being in the gym to doing competitions nationally and things like that. So tell me about that and what you would do how would you advise somebody who was perhaps inspired by what you were doing in the world of adaptive athletes?
I just say give it a go, but also like accept that you're probably going to be the only person in the room that looks like you. And if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, maybe sit with it and find a way to be comfortable with it, because you are going to be, probably very few of people that look like you in a room, and that's completely fine. But also know that people want to help. People never want to make other people feel ostracized in a fitness space. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by that, because I think a lot of people think, fitness is all about physique and aesthetics. And it's not. It's about going in and having a good time. And, if you ever want help, you can feel free to message me, or like follow people who have the same disability as you, or find something that works for you, but always give it a go. Because if you don't give it a go, you're never going to know how it's going to be, or how, if it's going to work for you, or if there's like another path that you could take. And there are so many people out there who are so willing to give their advice and give their help. Just find the people who either look like you or who are able to give you advice, and give it a go. Just go give it a try. Like, you'll be surprised at what you can do.
That's awesome. And you mentioned, finding your thing, when you came out of uni. Can you tell me a little bit about, before we go on to the podcast, what job were you doing before, and what was the experience like at university for you? Did you have an all-round positive, academic experience, and of course going into the world of work? Then was that an easy transition for you, and were you supported all the way through that?
It's so interesting. So in this, like, actually, my journey kind of starts in the end of my second year of uni. I ended up doing Camp America.
Oh yes, yeah,
So
awesome.
like I ended up going to be a lifeguard in New York
Mm.
for a summer, and that was like my second summer at uni, and it was honestly like the best summer of my life, and I loved it so much. And I remember being annoyed that I hadn't done it sooner, but I purposely waited until I was 21, because obviously in America you can't drink until you're 21. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go there, I want to be able to experience it all. I don't want to like half-ass it. So I did that, and as soon as I literally stepped off the plane, and I was like, I'm doing it again next summer. Like, I'm going back to the same place. I'm going to go to the same camp. I'm going to do the same stuff. I'm going to be a lifeguard again. It was incredible. So I ended up doing that when I came out of uni again. So that was my second summer. And then again, when I got off the plane that year, I was like, I'm going back again for my third year. So I actually did 3 years of camp, and it was incredible, and I loved it so much. And it was great because I got to be a lifeguard. I got to be on the water every day. I got to teach swimming. I got to drive a boat. Like, it was just idyllic. But because I knew I was going away for like 3 months of the year, I kind of didn't really see the point in me getting what I would, or what some people might call like a real job.
Hmm.
So like, there was no point in me going into corporate, because I would be leaving in like 6 months' time. There'll be no point in me moving somewhere, because I'd be leaving again. So I ended up just doing like random jobs. And then, because of the camp that I worked at, it was a camp for kids with autism.
Mm.
I ended up working for a company that deals with adults with learning disabilities, and they were really great about me leaving for summer, because they knew that what I was going to come back with was going to be more knowledge for the company. And that worked really, really well for me. And it's actually the job that I still do now.
Amazing.
but it's been an interesting ride because it's so far removed from what I did at uni. I actually studied history of art at uni, which is so far removed from what I do now. But actually, I'm coming to terms with the fact that this is like the end of the journey for me in this working world. After the pandemic, it was really difficult to work, and I'm sure that anybody who's been working in health and social care knows it was a really difficult 2.5 years, and emotionally like super stressful, super stressful, because you're not just worrying about yourself, you're worrying about all of your clients. And I'm kind of coming to terms with that this is like the end of the road for me. So there's like a new road forming, but I just don't know where it goes right now.
Okay, well that's exciting, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, you mentioned that the Camp America stuff. You know, I remember just briefly. I was able to do some time in the US at college for my university. You know, I did like a semester and a bit, and then was able to go back for a little while, and it changed my life because like before that, no one was like the college were like you can't come here. This was like a lot. This was before because I'm quite with this is gonna sound like I don't know if I'm gonna sound weird, but because I'm quite old. I'm quite old. So this was like a while ago when there was a lot of less support for people with disabilities. So the college in America were like, you can't come here because you won't be able to climb the stairs. I was like, yes, I can. And I ended up persuading them over a phone call. And it took me ages to get out there. But then it changed my life because I'd never been abroad for a long period of time before. And like, so and I just wanted to mention, like, obviously that must have been amazing to go out there for you and kind of, kind of create a life for you so separate to what you have here. You know what I mean? And learning those skills, I guess my question as a result of my little waffle there is what skills did you learn that you sort of took, into your working and personal life from that sort of, I guess it sounds like quite a defining experience for you, Camp America and doing that.
Like easily the most formative years of my life, those three, the summer of 2016, 17, and 18 were like really formative years for me. And I guess beforehand, I didn't really realize how like resilient I was. I knew that I was like a tough cookie, but I didn't really realize how much of a tough cookie I was. And it was just like the most incredible summers that we had. And I actually spoke to a friend of mine. All of my really good friends now seem to be from that period of time in my life. And we were saying like we would go back in a heartbeat. Like it was some of the toughest situations that you've been put in, because we were working with kids who were, they were essentially on respite away from their families. Their families needed the respite from them. So we had them for summer, and it was amazing, and it was the best experience ever. But some of the most like real challenging moments, trying to deal with kids who don't necessarily want to do what you're asking them to do, and who also are, have some form of learning disability as well on top of that. It adds like an extra layer. So I guess it taught me a lot of patience, and I guess it taught me that I'm a lot more resilient than I thought I was. And it put me on like a really great life trajectory. I mean, at one point I even seriously considered doing a PGCE, and I even went to interviews at uni because I thought, oh, I really want to be an SEN teacher, but that didn't work out. And I'm actually quite glad it didn't in the end. But it was such a formative 3 years of my life that I can't imagine what my life would be like without it now, because it's given me what I've got now. And that's incredible. And I'll forever be grateful for the owners of the camp for that, forever.
Absolutely. Those skills, those life skills, again, patience, understanding, empathy, that you've sort of acquired, that you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And that those skills certainly come into what you're doing now. Part of what you're doing now, like I say, you're great. I really enjoyed our interview when I was very privileged and honored to be on your Disabled and Proud podcast. I love what you're doing. I thought the interview was great. I think you've got real, it's a great skill to be able to talk to people and really listen, and have that. And I think, my next question is, you mentioned, the path, and you're not sure what it looks like right now and where you're going. Is the Disabled and Proud podcast part of that? And what are your goals with it?
So Disabled and Proud, really, like, honestly, it still shocks me that people listen to it and that people are interested in it, because it came to me as I was driving home like one February evening. And I was like, I'd just love to have a podcast or even listen to one with two disabled people just talking about disability, but also the disability not being like the main focus of the conversation. And I was like, where do I find this? And I was like really, really searching. And the whole reason why it started was because a couple of years ago, there was a government, like one of those classic forms. And one of the questions in the government form was, would you enter a relationship with a person with a physical disability? And there were like 4 responses, and it was like not important, like unimportant, like doesn't really matter, neutral, absolutely not, no way. And I remember reading that and being absolutely disgusted, because I was like, I fall into that category. How dare someone judge me and base me on my disability? And I remember making a video about it, and I went on a bit of a rant. And that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that and put it on my socials. I'd never, ever spoken about disability like that before. I'd never ranted about it. And it was just something that really, really upset me. And then from then I started talking about it a lot more, and talking about like my experiences as being a disabled woman and what it was like. And then from just speaking about disability a lot more, I was like, I'd love to have more of these conversations with other people, because the more I started speaking, the more I realized that, firstly, confidence in disability is not inherent. And I didn't notice that. So I didn't know that. I always thought that everybody who had a disability was confident in their disability. I've come to realize that that's not the case. And also, everybody refers and talks about their own disability very, very individually, rather than being this like one homogenized group. And so I was like, I'd love to have these conversations with people, because they're so important, and they're not, you can't really find it anywhere. And because of that, and because of I am the way I am, I was like, fine, fuck it, I'll create it. I'll do it. Like, I'll be the person. I didn't even know at that point if I could like hold an interview. I had no idea if I'd be able to.
I remember,
or like, and I spoke to you, and I was like, I really need to practice some interviews on you, because I know that you did it, and obviously we both have a really good mutual friend in common. And he was like, go and speak to Dom. He will be the one to help you. He'll be the one to direct you and guide you. He's the best person for this. And I was like, Jay, you're the man. I love you. Thank you.
I love him. Shout out to Jay. Yeah.
We love you, Jay. And so that's kind of how it came about. But because the more that I started thinking about it, the more I realized that it was going to be quite powerful. And I knew I didn't want to just half-arse it. I really wanted it to be really good. So it took me quite a while to get the idea together, and all of like the graphics and all that kind of stuff, because I wanted it to be as accessible as possible for everybody. And I'm still working on that right now. Like, I'm currently working with a designer who's building the website, and I'm currently getting the videos like put onto YouTube format, so that people who are, you know, aren't necessarily able to hear can watch the interviews and stuff. And so it's been like a really like long but rewarding process. And the more I'm getting involved in it, and the more I'm doing it, and the more interviews I'm having, the more I'm realizing that that's where I want my life to be going, because I'm loving having these conversations. I'm loving bringing the awareness about. And some of the messages that I'm getting from the podcast are just like, I just still can't really believe that people listen to what I have to say. Like, it's a bit mad.
I can. I think there's a real, you know, there's a real again, that empathy that you've learned, and that kind of understanding that you've learned over your, you know, your career and your time sort of comes across in those interviews. It's a real, you know, it's a nice experience, because it's fun as well, some of the questions, and it's an enjoyable experience, because it's not, you know, all about you know, it's not all about the disability. It's about how it affects the person, how that person works with it, and you know, and there are other passions and interests, which is really important. And I think that's great.
Exactly.
And I think there's a term that's come from that, and I'm never sure whether YouTube's algorithms allow this term, but I'm going to use it, because I've always looked at it. I think it's very specific, and I think it works in this context. How do you feel about disability? You know, that kind of that disability sort of porn, you know, thing where, you know, there's these platforms and people talk about the Paralympics and all this stuff, and obviously incredible athletes there, but we're sort of pedestaled You know,
Yeah.
I've had it my entire life, and like I say, back in 2005, when I was traveling around the world, it was, you know, you're such an inspiration, which is a lovely thing, and I've heard that a lot, as you will have done. And it's a lovely, you know, lovely compliment. Yeah, but it's like, okay, all right, do you actually know what I do, or are you just like, you just think you know, I'm cool because I'm outside, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I wonder again, you know, I haven't found a more kind of, there is a better term, but I remember reading an article, I think it was a BBC article that used the you know, you know, that kind of, you know, disabled porn you know, terminology, where we are pedestaled for our, you know, oh, you're so inspirational,
Yeah.
rather than our abilities. And I wonder where you stand on that. Like, are you a fan of when someone, you know, because again, you must get it a lot in the gym, you know, when you do competitions. And I'm making an assumption, Brooke, but
Yeah.
I assume that you get that you get it a lot. And how do you feel about it? That, you know, in terms of, you know, getting those kind of comments.
It's such a difficult knife edge. And it really is a knife edge, right? Because the whole reason there's such an issue with, and I'm going to say it, inspirational porn, is
Yeah.
because don't go up to someone who is disabled, and if they're in Sainsbury's picking up their sushi, that is not inspirational. It is not. Like, they are going about their daily life, and it's not inspirational for them just to be going to the shops to get their food. That is not inspirational. If they are doing something that you genuinely find inspirational, and they're talking about something that inspires you and ignites a passion in you, that's amazing. But the way that I see it is that if you feel inspired, that's incredible. But if you're like, you know, inspired because, or I don't really know how to phrase this very well, but essentially, if you're bashing your own body
Mm.
because I'm doing something with mine that is meant to be harder or perceived as more difficult, then you need to take a look at why that is. And that's not inspirational. You're using that to belittle yourself. There's nothing inspirational from that. I never want someone to look at me and what I'm doing and get annoyed at themselves because they're not doing something. That's not how it should be. So don't use, like, you know, that phrase of like, oh, so inspiring, and like, oh, why am I complaining because I can't do that and she can do that. I hate that so much, so much. I think it's awful. And like, people are always like, oh, like, what have I got to complain about? Like, I've got two hands. And I'm like, that's all good and well, but you might have shit going on in your life that I don't.
There you go.
And like, it's completely different. So don't compare on that level. You know, if what I'm saying is really resonating, then that's amazing. If that's inspiring, like, thank you. And I'm so happy that I'm able to do that. But don't bash yourself against me for things that I can do that you can't do. Because I think that's where, you know, that's where the problem lies. And I understand that people want to be like, oh, like, you've done really well and you've done amazing, but that's a societal issue. That's not, it's not an issue that I can necessarily like take on board and hammer home, because it's a big issue, and there are far more people who are much more eloquent on this topic than I am. And I feel like I've really butchered that answer, but it's a really difficult knife edge, because on the one hand, it's lovely to be inspiring, but on the other hand, at what cost is that inspiration? Because it's not just you at the end of the day, it's then the whole disabled community, right? Because you know, I know for a fact that if I go into Sainsbury's, I'm maybe one of two disabled people in Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
You know, so like, it's a really difficult knife edge, and it's one that you've got to really think about before like, I'm talking mainly to like able-bodied people here. You've really got to think about what you're saying before you say it. Because if you're saying someone's an inspiration for just going about their daily life and like just doing something because they're disabled, that's not inspirational. They're just living their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an interesting point there you make about, you know, that comparison. Oh, well, you know, it's not bad for me because I've got two working legs or two arms. But actually, again, it's that understanding that, you know, other people have stuff going on too. It doesn't matter how many, you know, what they've got going. You know, what if they've got a difference or a disability. You know, people are still living. Yeah, people are still living their lives. They're just living their lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it's difficult because people compare themselves and go, oh, well, I should be doing this and I should be doing that because this person's doing this because I see Brooke doing that. And actually it's about going, well, I've got stuff, I've got the opportunity to do stuff that you might not have, even if you've got two working limbs, for example, you know what I mean? And I think that's,
exactly.
it's an interesting topic. I can waffle on this stuff, and I do want to just take a moment for anybody that is listening to this or watching this. The correct term is inspiration porn. Thank you very much, Brooke, because if you search disability porn, you probably find something very different. So please use inspiration porn to find articles and information like the BBC article that I mentioned, and try and refrain from the other terminology used there. Inspiration porn will be where you find information on what we've just talked about and how disabled people with different needs can be spotlighted and pedestaled. Thanks very much for that, Brooke. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant to say.
The original, the term inspiration porn was coined by an Australian writer, and for the life of me right now, the name has escaped me, but essentially, like, if you Google it, it's the article that talks about Oscar Pistorius and his two legs, and if that's what you want to like learn inspiration porn about, that's the article to go to, because it's the one that breaks it down the best. It's a really eye-opening article if you can get your hands on it.
Yeah, I remember reading like I say, the BBC article that I referenced, and I just wanted to get your viewpoint as an athlete. And I think that, because again, you're in a situation, you're in the public eye, you're in an environment where people do pedestal, people go, oh, that person's so strong, or that person's so fit, or whatever, and so it is interesting to get your experiences, because I guess you probably, you will be pedestaled, in that way sometimes. And again, people react differently to it, don't they?
It's a difficult one, because at some point you've got to like show up to represent. And like, I am the only person that looks like me in my gym. And you've got to show up to represent, and like we've got to not prove a point, because you don't have to prove a point to anybody, but like you've got to be able to walk into those spaces and be like, well, this is just as much for me as it is for anybody else. At the same time, is that inspirational? Not really. I'm going to the gym because I enjoy it, but it's like I said, it's a really difficult one, because it's not inspirational because I'm going about my daily life, but the fact that I'm doing a sport that is not necessarily always open to disability, that's pretty inspirational. Like I said, like, it's a really fine line.
Yeah, it's picking the I guess it's picking the inspirational moments. If you're there on a national level representing, that's pretty cool. But if you're just sitting and say, if you just, driving, because that happens to me a lot. You can drive, stuff like that. It's different because that's just part of our lives, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's part of the day-to-day, then I guess it's for me, it's not inspirational. But if you're saying something that's like really, you're living your message, that's inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 or 3 questions now then before we finish. You mentioned just to go back to the podcast, you mentioned that you're not traditionally an interviewer, and you kind of come from the fitness world into the podcast. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced, getting that together, and how you overcame them?
I had, like, I hate to use that phrase, but I did have like massive imposter syndrome at the beginning, and I actually put it off for quite a while. Like I put it off for maybe about 6 months, put off like emailing people, because I knew I had this idea, but I was almost too nervous to email people and be like, oh, like, nobody really knows who I am, but I really want to interview you. But also, like, I haven't really interviewed many people ever before. And like, I'm not from like a journalistic background. I'm not from like, that type of world. But I love having conversations with people. And it took me quite a while to just realize that actually I just needed to bite the bullet. And that was like a learning curve. And there was a lot of other stuff going on as well. But I wasn't sure that I would be able to do it. And then I had the first few conversations, and I realized that actually my passion for what I was talking about and the message that I wanted to portray was bigger than my fears. And I needed to just get over them. I just needed to get over them, because for me, my podcast is not about me. It's about we, as in like the collective. And I think when you make what you're talking about or your message bigger than yourself, all of the obstacles that are in the way kind of break down, because actually it's not necessarily about you, it's about what other people can get from it. And my main thing is and I get really teary when I think about it, is
please do, it's cool.
What if there is a child, or like, you know, a parent, and their child has acquired a disability, or a child isn't necessarily confident in their disability, and like, where do they go to listen to just a conversation where it's like, do you know what, sometimes it's not amazing, but actually it's so fine, and like, you're so perfect the way you are. Like, where is that, without it being like about the medicine, or without it about being psychology, like where is just that chat? And I created that for someone.
Yes,
and that is like, for me, that's really important. And like, if I can help like at least like one person, then that's how I've done my job. Sorry, I get really emotional.
No. Thank you for sharing your emotion with me, Brooke. You know, I think you know, like I say, it's a beautiful thing you've been able to do. And without pedestaling you, you know, as we've just talked about, you know, like I say, as someone that does do interviews, like I say, one of the things that I admired most about your work was again how much empathy you had for other people, how much you were willing to listen, and how easy it was to talk with you, you know. And I think there's a great skill in that, because it's not about, and again, it's not about you getting these, you know, because again, some of the people you've interviewed, and I will put a link in the description to the podcast. They've got a lot of followers, and they're, you know, they're big names, you know, in the fitness world, and, you know, in their fields. So, you know, but it's more about the message, and it's more about that motivation. And we'll change the word from inspiration to motivation, I think, here. You know, because again, young people who look at you, and that's why I asked that question a little bit earlier, was that you're a cool looking person. You know, you look cool, you do cool shit, as we talked about, and that speaks volumes without you having to speak volumes. Do you know what I mean? So there's something to be very proud of there, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
A couple of questions to wrap up. I could talk to you for hours, and I hopefully we'll get to do another part of this, you know, in the future as well. I would like to ask about some of the misconceptions. These are sort of general questions now. Some of the biggest misconceptions about disability that you yourself would like to change. Maybe three, to, you know, just pick three, or as many as you wish. Some of the biggest misconceptions you wish there were more understanding around.
I think it would be amazing to realize that not all disability is the same. That is like my big one, is that not all disability is the same, and not all disability is, we're not like one homogenized group. It's, you know, it's so individual to the individual person. It's so individual, and I would love to see that portrayed a lot more. I really, really would. And I would love for people to realize that like disability isn't a bad thing. I would love to see that. And I think it's getting, you know, like, it's better. It is a lot better, but I think we could be doing a bit more. Could be a bit more like awareness. I would love to see more disability education. I'd love to be able to see, you know, like younger children really being taught about disability and how it's not a bad thing. And I think I would love for it for there to be like, I don't know what the solution is, but if you acquire a disability later on in life, for you to realize that that's not the end of, and like there is safety, and like you can still like live your life and be yourself. It's just a bit different. I would love there to be something. And I don't necessarily think it's like a charity or an organization. I think, again, it's more about awareness, about, you know, how big, you know, acquiring or becoming disabled is not to be feared, because I think it is a big fear for a lot of people. So yeah, I think I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's adapting, isn't it? It's you know, and looking at resources. And I was thinking about this before the interview. Like, I could see, you know, years down the line, You know, this is the kind of thing, you know, at the end of terms in schools where they have the TV, you know, where you watch movies and stuff or listen to things, you know, when kids do that at the end of their school term, you know, they have their final day. I was like, wouldn't it be cool to have the Disabled and Proud podcast on as a resource for kids to
Oh
understand?
yeah,
You know what I mean? I was like, that's where I think your podcast would be really good as a resource for people. Or, you know, if somebody, you know, if like, you know, obviously it would have to be done in a certain way. But if you know anybody wanting to signpost any resources to people to better understand disabilities, go and listen to this, go watch this. You know, I thought, you know, your podcast would be great for
I
that.
would absolutely love that. And I think that's where I would love to be able to take this. And that's where I'd love to be able for it, that direction for it to go in.
Absolutely.
Just,
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
there's so much scope for goodness with what it does and what it's doing. And I'm excited to see it go now, because there's only 7 episodes out, and yeah, it's doing really well. And I've kind of like given birth to this like baby now, and I want to see it like walk and run and fly. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
I'm excited too. I think it's going to be amazing. Okay, 2 more then. We'll do this because I think it's only fair you did it with me at the end of our interview. And I'd like to ask, you know, whether it was in the gym or whether it's out in the bar or whether it's, you know, out in the street in Sainsbury's, what are some of the weirdest questions that you get asked, Brooke, and how do you respond to them?
I speak, I mean, I feel sorry for the people who listen to my podcast, because I say this nearly every interview. So like for me, the most annoying question is, how did it happen? And that's purely because nothing happened to me. Like I was born disabled. I don't know life without disability. And I guess people always seem to think that there has to be like some magical thing or like some tragic thing that happened, because there needs to be like some form of story. So that really annoys me. And I'm like, nothing happened. And then I tend to like walk away. I'm like, nothing happened. Because people can, and it also depends how people phrase it, right? And their tone of voice, like, oh, how did it happen? And you're like, nothing happened. End of conversation. Or if people are genuinely interested, I'm like, oh, well, it's not really an interesting story. Like I was born this way. That's that. Like end of. But when I was younger, I used to get a lot of, oh, did a shark bite your arm off? I was like, oh, like we live in England.
Yeah.
It would have made headline news.
I wish I could tell you a shout a bit by, yeah.
Like like, you know, I wish I had some crazy story that you clearly like want, but like I don't have it, and I'm the wrong person to be asking.
Yeah.
And also like if a shark had bitten my arm off, like, that would be so traumatic. What a horrendous question to then ask someone.
Yeah.
But it would also have been like definitely splashed across every single freaking newspaper in the UK. And like my face probably would be pretty well known for that. So obviously it didn't.
Yeah. Do you have any? I mean, interestingly enough as well, because I think this is something that gets glossed over in some of these interviews. Obviously, you mentioned, you know, you've been able to, you know, like I say, you get out there and you do a lot of cool stuff, and you obviously I believe you last time we spoke, you do have a partner as well. What have you ever had any weird questions related to dating? Because I think that is worth talking about while I've got you, because again, you're very cool, you do some cool stuff, you must get a lot of I'm going to use the word attention. How do you respond to that? Because again, that's always a question that sometimes gets glossed over.
Yeah, so I'm a single lady now.
Okay, so okay, cool.
It's absolutely fine. It's an interesting one. So like I only really like delved into dating apps for the first time ever last year. Beforehand, wasn't really interested in it, and I'm still not necessarily sure that I am that interested in it. Like I think my life is a bit more about building like my success than anything right now. But I make it very obvious on my dating like profiles that I only have one hand. Like I use pictures of me in a full-length mirror. Like my bio is like looks 8 out of 10, personality 8 out of 10, hands 1 out of 2.
Amazing.
So like I make it really, really obvious so that like, you know, if I meet a guy, it's not like, oh, like what happened? Like, you know, it's there to be seen. And I think, you know, that's the best way forward, like for me. I haven't really had any weird questions, which is good. I've had some people try and make a bit of a joke, and I'm like, don't know you not on that level yet. So like,
right, okay. Right.
You're trying to break the ice, but like it's just not funny. Like I don't know you well enough to do that yet. So
yeah. Is there
Just have to.
is there a 3-date rule or a 5-date rule to when that kind of humor can come in?
Yeah,
Or
no, like if I get to know you and we vibe well, then like
yeah,
maybe there'll be a joke. But like it just depends on the person, like who you are. Like,
yeah.
but like messaging me on like Bumble, being like, "Ha, looks armsy," and I'm like, no, get away. Like,
Wow. Again, I hope you don't mind me asking that question, but again, I
no,
think
not
for
at
people
all.
that do stumble upon this, who again, because again, that's a big thing. Confidence. You mentioned, it can affect people in different ways. But I
Yeah, for
think
sure.
again, you do so much stuff, so much cool stuff, and but I think people do tend to gloss over the sort of dating side of it, and because I when I go into schools or colleges, one of the questions I do get asked is, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a partner? And how do you have, how does that work? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think it's a question I've started to bring into these interviews, just because I think it's where appropriate, can bring some interesting answers in that can hopefully motivate some people. Final question then, to those who have supported you, and those who will continue to do so, and those who have not yet discovered your work as the Disabled and Proud podcast or as an adaptive athlete. What have you got to say to those people that have supported you and will continue to do so?
Oh, just like the biggest thank you ever. Like it genuinely blows my mind that people listen to the podcast. And that for me is unbelievable. And like to every single person who sent me a message saying like they're so happy that they've listened to it or they've learned something, I don't have enough thank yous. Oh god, I'm getting really emotional. Like I don't have the words to say thank you, because from what was like a really small brain fart, it's turned into something quite beautiful, and I'm very proud of it. And like thank you to thanks to anyone who's like ever supported me and listened to it, because it means the world. Like it really means the world. And like by listening to it, you don't know who else you're going to help, and that means something to me. Yeah, it's really big. Like just thank you, and like keep listening, please.
Absolutely. Well, you've taken your message out from wherever you're sat right now out into the world. You know what I mean? And it's an amazing achievement to be able to do that, because again,
Thank you.
it's really cool. Okay, well, obviously, so I'm going to put some links in the description. Is there anything else you would like to plug? This is the press bit of the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to plug? Any competitions, any projects, anything else you want to plug apart from the Disabled and Proud podcast, which I will post in the description?
Do you know what? I'm going to stick to the podcast. Just please, please, please go check it out. Go listen. Leave a 5-star review if you love it. You know, even the guests who have been on it, message the guests who have been on it, because they also love getting feedback, and like just please follow, like, listen. It's Disabled and Proud podcast on Instagram. If you search Disabled and Proud on Spotify or iTunes or like wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find it. There's like a picture of my face. It's kind of hard to miss. And just give it a listen, and let me know if you learn anything, or let me know if you like it. Like it's my baby, and I'm so proud of it.
Awesome, man. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Brooke, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to doing
Thank you
another
so much
part of
for
this
having
interview.
me. Thank you so much for having me. I love these conversations.